No one noticed the woman crying in the bathroom because she wasn't crying. She was counting. 4 stalls, 2 exits, 1 man in the building every woman had warned her about. The music from the club below pulsed through the floor, a steady rhythm that matched her heartbeat as she pressed her palms against the cold marble sink and forced herself to breathe. In exactly 4 minutes, she would walk back into that room. In exactly 4 minutes, everything would change. Nia had been a dancer for 7 years, and in that time she'd learned that survival wasn't about strength. It was about timing. It was about knowing when to move and when to stay absolutely still. It was about reading a room faster than anyone else could blink. And tonight, in a private club in downtown Chicago, where the city's most dangerous men gathered to pretend they were civilized, she had read the room perfectly. She knew exactly what she had to do. The bathroom door opened. Nia didn't flinch. A woman stumbled in, expensive heels clicking against tile, designer dress shimmering under harsh fluorescent light. She was young, maybe 23, with the kind of beauty that came from money and good genes and the certainty that the world would always say yes. She glanced at Nia with that particular blend of curiosity and dismissal that rich white women had perfected over centuries. "You should leave," the woman said, reapplying lipstick in the mirror. "Dante Moretti is out there tonight. You don't want to be here when things get complicated." Nia met her eyes in the reflection. "Who's Dante Moretti?" The woman laughed, sharp and bitter. "The man every smart woman in this city runs from. Owns half the politicians, most of the judges, and all of the fear. His father built an empire on blood. Dante inherited it and made it worse." She capped her lipstick with a decisive click. 3 women have tried to get close to him this year. 1 disappeared. 1 ended up in witness protection. 1 married a stockbroker in Connecticut and never looks over her shoulder anymore without flinching. "Sounds like a charming guy," Nia said softly. "He is, actually. That's the problem." The woman's smile faded. "He's brilliant, educated. He quotes poetry and donates to children's hospitals, and probably genuinely believes he's making the world better by controlling it. But at the end of the day, he's still a killer. And the women who forget that don't last long." She turned to face Nia directly. "I'm telling you this because you seem nice. Whatever you came here for tonight, it's not worth it. Walk out. Go home. Forget you ever heard his name." Nia nodded slowly. "Thank you for the warning." The woman left. Nia waited 30 seconds, then followed. The main room was exactly as she'd memorized it from the photos she'd studied for 3 weeks. High ceilings, crystal chandeliers that cost more than most people's houses. Windows that overlooked the Chicago River, dark and glittering with reflected city lights. Tables arranged in careful clusters, designed to give the illusion of intimacy while maintaining clear sightlines for the security team positioned at every exit. 73 people in attendance. 42 men, 31 women, 12 armed guards trying to look like waitstaff. And at the center of it all, at a table positioned with mathematical precision to command the room without dominating it, sat Dante Moretti. He was younger than she'd expected. 34, according to her research, but he carried himself with the weight of someone much older. Dark hair cut precisely. Suit that probably cost 5 figures, tailored so perfectly it looked effortless. Strong jaw, dark eyes, the kind of face that would have been handsome if it wasn't so carefully controlled. He sat alone at a table for 6, and the empty chairs around him weren't accidental. They were a statement. Everyone in the room was aware of him, not watching directly, but tracking him in peripheral vision, the way prey tracks a predator. Conversations adjusted themselves around his presence. Laughter died when he shifted in his chair. The whole room breathed in rhythm to his existence. Nia had seen this before. Not here, not at this level of wealth and violence, but she'd seen it. The performer everyone feared. The star who could make or break a career with a glance. The person who held all the power and all the loneliness that came with it. She'd been counting on that loneliness. The music cut. Someone was making a toast, something about celebrating success and partnership. Words that meant nothing and everything in a room like this. Dante lifted his glass with everyone else, the gesture automatic, empty. His eyes scanned the room with the boredom of a man who had seen this same scene 1,000 times. And then his eyes found hers. Nia didn't look away. She'd practiced this. 3 weeks of watching videos, studying photos, learning the patterns of his behavior until she could predict his movements better than his own staff. She knew what bored him. She knew what intrigued him. She knew that every woman in his world either threw themselves at him out of greed or ran from him out of fear, and she knew that neither response had touched him in years. So, She did something different. She looked at him without fear, without desire, without calculation visible on her face, even though every muscle in her body was calculating, measuring, preparing. She looked at him like he was a weapon she'd decided to pick up. The toast ended. The music resumed. Nia crossed the room. Her heels were steady. She'd chosen them carefully. 3-inch height, perfect balance, the kind of shoes that said confidence without screaming desperation. Her dress was black, simple. Expensive enough to belong here, but not so expensive it looked like she was trying too hard. She'd learned a long time ago that the key to moving through spaces you didn't belong was to look like you'd simply forgotten you weren't supposed to be there. Security noticed her. She felt their attention sharpen as she moved past tables full of men who thought they were important, past women who'd paid fortunes to look effortlessly beautiful, past all the careful hierarchies and unspoken rules that governed rooms like this. She walked straight to Dante Moretti's table and stopped. Up close, he was even more controlled than she'd expected. Not a movement wasted, not a flicker of surprise in his eyes, even though she knew he hadn't expected her approach. The men at the table behind him tensed. One of them started to stand. Dante lifted one finger half an inch off the table, and the man sat back down. That kind of control. That kind of power. Exactly what she needed. "Mr. Moretti," she said. Her voice was steady, quiet enough that only he could hear over the music, loud enough that he knew she wasn't afraid to speak. "My name is Nia Chen. I need 5 minutes of your time." "Do you?" It wasn't a question. His voice was deeper than she'd expected, rougher, like he didn't use it often for anything except giving orders. "I do." "And what makes you think," Dante said softly, "that I give my time to strangers who walk up to my table uninvited?" Nia glanced at the 5 empty chairs. "It looks like you have time to spare." Someone behind her inhaled sharply. The security guard nearest to them shifted his weight, hand moving incrementally closer to whatever weapon he carried under his jacket. The air in the room changed, tension crackling like static before a lightning strike. Dante smiled. It didn't reach his eyes. "You're either incredibly brave or incredibly stupid." "Neither," Nia said. "I'm incredibly desperate, and I think you're the only person in this city who might find that interesting instead of pathetic." The smile faded. He studied her with the focus of a man who had built an empire on reading people, on knowing their weaknesses before they did, on turning human nature into profit and power. Nia forced herself to stand still under that gaze. Let him look, let him assess. She'd built her entire plan on the bet that what he saw would intrigue him more than it threatened him. 5 minutes, Dante said finally. He gestured to the chair closest to him. "Sit." Nia sat. She kept her posture straight, hands folded in her lap, ankles crossed. The posture of someone who'd been trained in performance, in holding her body with precision even when every instinct screamed to run. "Talk," Dante said. "If I don't choose you tonight," Nia said clearly, "I won't survive the week." The room didn't actually go quiet. The music kept playing. Conversations continued. But around their table, a bubble of silence formed, filled with the weight of words that couldn't be unsaid. Dante leaned back in his chair. "Choose me for what, exactly?" "Protection, partnership, whatever you want to call it." Nia met his eyes. "I need someone powerful enough that the people trying to kill me will think twice. Someone dangerous enough that approaching me becomes more costly than leaving me alone. And I need someone smart enough to understand why I'm offering myself as an asset instead of begging for charity." "You think highly of yourself." "I think realistically about myself," Nia corrected. "I'm a professional dancer. I run a studio in Pilsen. I have connections in communities you can't access, and skills in reading people that your security team hasn't developed because they've been trained to intimidate, not to observe. I notice things. I remember patterns. And right now, I notice that every woman in this room is either terrified of you or performing attraction so fake it should come with a disclaimer, and you're bored enough by both responses that you let a stranger walk up to your table just because I did something different." Dante's expression didn't change, but something flickered in his eyes. Interest. The first real emotion she'd seen from him. "You said people are trying to kill you," he said. "Who?" "Deputy Commissioner Marcus Thorne." That got a reaction. Dante's stillness shifted quality, became the stillness of a predator focusing on prey. "Thorne is a decorated police official, well-connected, popular with the media. Why would he want you dead?" "Because I accidentally became the owner of a ledger documenting 3 years of money laundering he's been running through local businesses." Nia kept her voice level, He's been using small establishments, immigrant-owned, places that don't have the resources to fight back. My studio was one of them. I didn't know until 6 days ago when my accountant noticed the discrepancies and started asking questions. 3 days ago, my accountant was killed in a car accident that wasn't an accident. 2 days ago, someone tried to break into my apartment. Yesterday, I got a message telling me I had 48 hours to turn over the ledger, or I'd have an accident too. And do you have this ledger? Nia held his gaze. Yes. Where is it? Somewhere Thorne can't access it without leaving a trail that would expose him. She paused. Somewhere I can access it if I need leverage. Dante studied her for a long moment. You're playing a dangerous game. I'm playing the only game I have left, Nia said. Thorne has resources I can't match. Police connections, political protection, money, violence. I can't run from him. I can't hide from him. And I can't trust the legal system to protect me from someone who owns pieces of it. But I can make myself too expensive to kill. If I'm associated with you, if harming me means starting a war with Dante Moretti, then suddenly the cost-benefit analysis changes. You want to use my reputation as a shield. I want to offer you information and access in exchange for that shield. Yes. What makes you think I won't just take the ledger and leave you to Thorne? Because you're not bored by this conversation, Nia said simply. You're not bored by me. And I think you've been bored for a very long time. The silence stretched. Nia could feel eyes on them now, the whole room pretending not to watch while watching with desperate intensity. She'd gambled everything on this moment, 3 weeks of preparation. Every dollar she had left after paying off everyone she could to get access to this club, to this event, to this room. Her entire survival balanced on whether she'd read this man correctly. Dante reached into his jacket. Nia's heart stopped, but he pulled out a phone, typed something, and set it face down on the table. My car is outside, he said. We're going to leave together. When we get in that car, you're going to tell me everything. Names, dates, specifics. You're going to show me this ledger. And then I'm going to decide whether you're a brilliant strategist or an idiot who just signed her own death warrant by walking into a room full of criminals and announcing she has evidence that could destroy a police. Commissioner. Nia stood. Fair enough. They walked out together. The room watched. Nia felt the weight of their stares, felt the confusion and calculation and fear. She knew what they were thinking. Another woman approaching Dante Moretti. Another woman who would disappear or break or run. Let them think that. Let them underestimate what was actually happening. The night air hit her face like a slap, cold and sharp after the warmth of the club. Lake Michigan stretched dark beyond the buildings, the city lights reflecting off its surface in scattered diamonds. A black SUV waited at the curb, engine running, windows tinted to opacity. The driver's door opened, and a man stepped out, built like he'd been constructed rather than born, with the watchful eyes of someone who'd spent a lifetime identifying threats. Carlo, Dante said. We're going to the estate. Carlo's eyes flicked to Nia, assessment and dismissal in a single glance. Sir. The back door opened. Nia climbed in. The interior smelled like leather and something else. Something expensive and masculine that she couldn't identify. Dante slid in beside her. The door closed. The locks engaged with a heavy click that sounded disturbingly final. The car pulled into traffic. Talk, Dante said. Nia reached into her clutch. Carlo's hand moved toward his jacket. Dante held up one finger and Carlo froze. Nia pulled out a folded piece of paper and handed it to Dante. He unfolded it, studied it. His expression didn't change, but she saw his jaw tighten fractionally. It was a floor plan of his estate. How did you get this? Dante said quietly. Public records for the original construction. Interviews with former staff posted on employment review sites. Satellite imagery. 3 weeks of research. Nia kept her voice steady. The northeast wing has a blind spot in camera coverage. Your security rotates, shifts at 11:15 and 3:15, with a 7-minute gap in the perimeter during changeover. You have 14 armed personnel on site at any given time, but only 9 during daylight hours. Your personal quarters are on the 3rd floor, east side, with reinforced windows and a panic room accessible through the master closet. The car felt very small suddenly. Very quiet. You researched me, Dante said. Each word precisely spaced, precisely controlled. I researched you the way you research everyone who walks into your world, Nia said. The difference is I'm showing you my work instead of pretending I don't know who you are. Most people who research me this thoroughly are planning to kill me. Most people who research you this thoroughly are your competitors. I'm not competing with you, Mr. Moretti. I'm auditioning for you." He turned to look at her fully for the first time since they'd entered the car. In the dim light from passing streetlights, his face was all shadows and sharp angles. "Auditioning. You need people who can observe without being observed, who can move through spaces you can't access, who can read social dynamics and power structures and identify weaknesses before they become problems." Nia held his gaze. "I've spent 7 years as a professional dancer. I've performed in venues from community centers to corporate galas. I've taught classes to teenagers and politicians' wives and off-duty cops and gang members' girlfriends. I know how to read a room. I know how to be invisible when I need to be, and memorable when that serves me better. I know how to listen to what people aren't saying, and you think those skills are valuable to me. I think you have a dozen men who can shoot a gun, and maybe 2 who can tell you why someone is lying before they open their mouth." Nia glanced at Carlo's rigid shoulders in the front seat. "I think you have enforcers and soldiers and people who are very good at violence. And I think you have very few people who are good at understanding the human behavior that leads to betrayal before the betrayal happens." Dante was quiet for a long moment. The car turned onto Lakeshore Drive, the dark water of Michigan stretching endlessly to their left. "Tell me about the ledger," he said finally. Nia told him. She'd practiced this part too, organized the information in her mind until she could deliver it clearly, concisely, persuasively. She explained how Thorne had been running money through small businesses for years, using his position to intimidate owners into compliance, threatening deportation or inspections or legal troubles for anyone who pushed back. How her studio had been flagged by her accountant, a woman named Sarah Chen who'd been helping Nia's mother with the books for 20 years and knew what normal transactions looked like. How Sarah had started pulling threads and found a whole tapestry of corruption underneath. How Sarah had been killed for it. Nia's voice stayed steady through that part. She'd cried for Sarah. She'd cried for 3 days after the accident that had crushed Sarah's car into a barrier on the expressway, at exactly the moment when traffic cameras were mysteriously offline. She'd cried until she had no tears left, and only rage remained, cold and calculating and sharp enough to cut. Sarah documented everything before she died. Nia said, "Accounts, transactions, names. She gave it to me because she knew they were coming for her and she wanted someone to finish what she'd started. She wanted justice. And you want revenge," Dante said. "I want survival," Nia corrected. "Revenge is a luxury for people who have the power to take it. I don't. But you do. What makes you think I care about what Thorne has done?" "I don't think you care about justice or morality or any of that." Nia turned to face him directly. "I think you care about power, and I think you're smart enough to see that a dirty police commissioner isn't an ally. He's a liability. He's sloppy. He's leaving trails. And eventually those trails will lead back to everyone he's connected with, including you. You think I'm connected with Thorne? I think everyone at your level is connected to everyone at his level in ways that look legitimate until someone starts pulling records. And I think you'd rather control when and how those connections are exposed than wait for Thorne's sloppiness to blow back on your operation." Dante smiled. It was a real smile this time, sharp and genuinely amused. "You're either smarter than you look, or you've had a very good teacher. I had a mother who immigrated from Taiwan with nothing and built a successful business in a country that didn't want her. I learned strategy from watching her survive." Nia's voice softened slightly. "And I learned observation from 7 years of teaching dance to people who were all performing different versions of themselves." The car turned through tall gates that opened smoothly, silently. The estate sprawled before them, exactly as the floor plan had shown, but larger, more imposing. 3 stories of stone and glass and power built into architecture, lights glowed in scattered windows. Security cameras tracked their approach. They pulled up to the main entrance. Carlo opened Dante's door. Dante stepped out, then turned back to offer Nia his hand. She took it. His grip was firm, controlled, the kind of touch that promised both protection and threat, depending on which side of the bargain you stood on. Nia stepped out of the car and followed Dante up wide stone steps to massive wooden doors that opened before they reached them. The interior was exactly what she'd expected. Wealth displayed with such casual confidence it didn't need to announce itself. Original art on the walls. Floors that gleamed. Furniture that had been chosen by someone with actual taste, rather than someone trying to prove they could afford expensive things. It was beautiful in the way that dangerous things could be beautiful when they were perfectly made. Dante led her through hallways that seemed designed to disorient, Multiple turns and corridors that all looked similar until you realized each one had slight differences in the art. The lighting, the spacing of doors, security protocol built into architecture. By the time they reached a heavy oak door on the second floor, Nia had counted 3 more security personnel and revised her estimate of the estate's defenses upward. The room beyond the door was an office. Floor-to-ceiling bookshelves lined 2 walls. A massive desk dominated the space. Windows overlooked manicured grounds that disappeared into darkness beyond the reach of strategically placed lights. Dante gestured to a chair. Nia sat. He moved to a small bar built into one of the bookshelves, poured 2 glasses of something amber, brought one to her. "You don't have to drink it," he said, "but it's 30-year-old scotch and it's wasted on fear." Nia took the glass. She didn't drink. She set it on the small table beside her chair and folded her hands in her lap. Dante's smile flickered again, brief and sharp. "Smart." He settled into the chair behind his desk, swirled his own drink, watched her over the rim of the glass. "Now, let's talk about what you're really asking for." "Protection," Nia said. "Access to resources I can't get on my own. Time to figure out how to use what I know without getting killed for it. And what am I getting in return? Information on Thorn that you can use however you want. Insight into parts of this city your usual networks don't reach. An extra set of eyes in places where your people would be noticed." Nia paused. "And someone who understands that partnership means mutual benefit, not subordination." "You're not offering to work for me. I'm offering to work with you," Nia corrected. "There's a difference. Most people don't make that distinction when they walk into my world. Most people are afraid of you. I'm just realistic about you." Dante set his glass down. "You said Thorn gave you 48 hours. When does that clock run out? Tomorrow night, 11 p.m. And you think being here, being associated with me, is enough to stop him? I think it changes the equation. If I'm just a dancer with information, I'm easy to eliminate. If I'm connected to you, killing me becomes complicated, political, expensive." Nia held his gaze. "I'm not asking you to fight my battles. I'm asking you to make my survival costly enough that Thorn decides it's not worth the investment. What if I decide you're not worth the investment? Then I walk out of here tonight, and I'm dead by Sunday," Nia said calmly. "But I don't think that's going to happen." "Why not?" "Because you haven't been bored once in this entire conversation. Because I showed you something new. Because every woman in that club tonight was either running from you or performing for you, and I did neither. I made you a business proposition." Nia leaned forward slightly. "And because I think you've been surrounded by people who fear you, and people who need you, and people who want to use you for so long that you've forgotten what it feels like when someone just sees you clearly and makes an informed choice." The silence that followed was different than before. It had weight. Substance. Dante stood. He moved to the window, hands in his pockets, looking out over his grounds. "You know what you're asking for?" he said quietly. "You're asking to enter a world that doesn't forgive mistakes, that doesn't offer second chances. Once you're in, there's no walking away. I understand." "Do you?" He turned to face her. "You're a dancer, Nia. You teach classes. You run a studio. You have a life that exists in daylight, in normal spaces with normal people. Come into my world and that ends. Everything changes. Everyone you know becomes either a liability or a leverage point. Every friendship becomes transactional. Every moment becomes calculated. You're describing my life as a black woman running a business in a city that would prefer I didn't exist," Nia said. "You think I don't already calculate every moment? You think I don't already understand that my survival depends on reading rooms correctly and making strategic choices about who to trust? The only difference between your world and mine is that you have the power to make the danger visible, instead of pretending it doesn't exist." Dante studied her for a long moment. Then he moved back to his desk, opened a drawer, pulled out a phone. He made a call. "Victor, I need everything you have on Deputy Commissioner Marcus Thorn. Financial records, communications, associates, movements. I need it yesterday." He paused, listening. "I don't care what it costs. Get it done." He ended the call and looked at Nia. "You're staying here tonight." It wasn't a question. "Okay," Nia said. "Carla will show you to a guest room. Don't leave it until morning. Don't touch anything. Don't try to explore." His voice was flat, absolute. "You wanted my protection. This is what it looks like. You follow my rules in my house, or you're out." "Understood." He studied her a moment longer, as if waiting for her to crack, to show fear or hesitation or any of the normal human responses to being told she was essentially a prisoner for the night. But Nia had learned a long time ago that survival meant keeping fear locked down tight where it couldn't be used against you. Dante nodded once, sharp and decisive. "Carlo." The door opened. Carlo stood framed in the entrance, massive and impassive. "Show Miss Chen to the blue room," Dante said. "Make sure she has everything she needs." Nia stood. She picked up the scotch he'd poured for her and took a single sip, letting the burn of it anchor her, remind her she was still here, still alive, still in control of her choices. Then she set the glass down and followed Carlo out. The blue room was exactly that. Walls painted a deep navy that somehow felt calming rather than oppressive. Furniture in lighter blues and soft grays. Windows that overlooked darkness. It was beautiful. It was also clearly designed to be comfortable enough that a guest wouldn't complain, but isolated enough that they couldn't cause problems. "Bathroom's through there," Carlo said, gesturing to a door. "Don't leave this room. Don't open the windows. Security will be outside all night." "Thank you," Nia said. He studied her with flat, assessing eyes. "You're either very smart or very stupid. Everyone keeps saying that." "Yeah, well, most people who walk into Dante Moretti's life don't walk back out." He turned to leave, paused. "For what it's worth, I hope you're the smart kind." The door closed. A lock clicked. Nia stood in the center of the blue room and let herself shake. Just for a moment. Just long enough to let the adrenaline work through her system. Let the fear and the desperation and the sheer insanity of what she'd just done crash over her in waves. Then she breathed, centered herself, moved to the bathroom and splashed cold water on her face, studying her reflection in the mirror. She looked the same. Same dark eyes. Same face that her mother had always said was pretty enough to get attention, but not so pretty it became a weapon people used against her. Same body that had been trained to move with precision and grace and power. But she wasn't the same. She'd walked into Dante Moretti's world tonight. She'd gambled everything on a strategy that depended on reading a man she'd never met, on betting that he was bored enough and smart enough and lonely enough to find her interesting instead of threatening. And so far, she'd been right. Nia stripped off her dress, hung it carefully in the closet where she found clothes that were probably meant for guests, all in neutral sizes and colors. She pulled on soft pajamas that fit well enough, climbed into the enormous bed, and stared at the ceiling. Tomorrow, everything would change. Tomorrow, Dante would have the information on Thorne, and he'd make his decision about whether she was worth protecting. Tomorrow, she'd find out if her gamble had paid off, or if she'd just accelerated her own death. But tonight, she was alive. She was inside Dante Moretti's estate, under his protection, inside his world. Tonight, she'd accomplished exactly what she'd set out to do. Nia closed her eyes and, despite everything, fell asleep almost immediately. Years of dance training had taught her to rest when she could, because tomorrow she'd need all her strength for the performance of her life. She woke to sunlight streaming through windows that she was fairly certain had been dark when she'd fallen asleep, which meant someone had come in during the night to open the curtains. The thought should have been disturbing. Instead, it was oddly reassuring. Dante's people were watching her, which meant he was taking her seriously enough to track her movements. Someone knocked on the door. It opened before she could respond. A woman entered, older, elegant, carrying a tray with coffee and what looked like a full breakfast. "Mr. Moretti thought you might be hungry," the woman said. Her voice was crisp, professional, with a slight accent Nia couldn't quite place. "I'm Elena. I manage the household." "Thank you," Nia said, sitting up. Elena set the tray on the small table near the window, poured coffee with the precision of someone who'd done this thousands of times. "Mr. Moretti would like you to join him in his office at 10. Carlo will come to escort you." "What time is it now?" 8:30. Nia nodded. "I'll be ready." Elena studied her with sharp, intelligent eyes. "The closet has appropriate clothes. If nothing fits, let Carlo know and I'll bring alternatives." She left. Nia ate breakfast, surprised to find she was genuinely hungry. The coffee was perfect. The food was excellent. Everything about this place was designed to make guests comfortable, which probably meant it was also designed to make them complacent. She wouldn't be complacent. At 9:45, dressed in clothes from the closet that fit surprisingly well, black pants, cream blouse, low heels, Nia stood by the door and waited. At 9:58, Carlo knocked. "Time to go," he said. She followed him through the estate's corridors, noting differences from last night, marking exits and security cameras and the positions of staff moving through the hallways. Information was currency here. The more she gathered, the more valuable she became. Dante's office looked different in daylight. The windows revealed grounds that stretched for what had to be acres, landscaped with the kind of casual perfection that cost a fortune to maintain. The bookshelves she'd noticed last night were filled with actual books, many of them clearly read, some with worn spines and dog-eared pages that suggested they weren't just decoration. Dante stood by the window, dressed more casually than last night, dark jeans, black sweater, no tie. He looked younger somehow, or maybe just more human without the armor of a formal suit. "Sit," he said without turning around. Nia sat in the same chair as last night. Waited. Dante moved to his desk, opened a laptop, turned it to face her. Victor pulled Thorne's records. Financial, communications, association maps, everything. The screen showed documents, spreadsheets, photos. Nia's stomach tightened. This was real. This was happening. Your accountant was right, Dante said. Thorne's been running money through dozens of businesses for at least 5 years. Probably longer. He's good at hiding it, but not good enough. Once you know what to look for, the patterns are obvious. He touched the screen, brought up a different page. He's also connected to organizations I'd prefer not to have operating in my city. Rival operations? Nia asked quietly. Ambitious operations. The kind that think they can build power by being more brutal than necessary, which makes them sloppy and dangerous. Dante closed the laptop. You were right about one thing. Thorne is a liability, and I don't tolerate liabilities in my territory. So you'll help me? I'll handle Thorne, Dante corrected. Which has the side effect of protecting you, but that's not the primary motivation. Don't confuse pragmatism with altruism, Nia. I never do, she said. He smiled slightly. No, I don't think you do. He moved around the desk, leaned against its edge, studying her. Let's talk about what happens next. You wanted protection. You're getting it, but it comes with conditions. You work for me now, not with me, for me. You do what I tell you, when I tell you, no questions. You live here, on the estate, where my security can watch you and where Thorne can't reach you. You cut ties with your old life gradually, carefully, in ways that don't create loose ends that could be used against either of us. And in return, you're safe, you're fed, you're alive. Clear? Every word was another lock clicking into place, another door closing. Nia felt the weight of it, felt the cage being built around her survival even as it saved her life. But she'd known this was coming. She'd walked into this with her eyes open. Clear, she said. Except for one thing. Dante's eyebrow rose fractionally. You said I work for you, not with you. But that's not what you actually want. Nia kept her voice level, reasonable. You have plenty of people who work for you, who take orders and execute them and never question anything. If that's all you needed, you wouldn't have listened to me last night. You would have thrown me out or taken the ledger and let Thorne have me. You listened because I offered you something different. Partnership, insight, someone who thinks instead of just follows. The air in the room felt charged, dangerous. Nia could feel Carlo's presence behind her, could practically hear his hand moving toward his weapon. But Dante just laughed. It was a real laugh, surprised and genuinely amused. You're right, he said. I do have plenty of people who follow orders. Most of them are idiots. Some of them are competent. A few are actually smart. But none of them have ever walked into my office and corrected my terms on the second day. Is that a problem? Nia asked. It's refreshing. Dante crossed his arms. All right, modified terms. You work with me. You have autonomy in how you execute tasks, but the tasks themselves aren't negotiable. You live here until it's safe to do otherwise, which might be months or might be years depending on how things develop. You learn how this world works, you adapt, and you make yourself valuable enough that protecting you is an investment rather than a charity. Fair? Fair, Nia said. Good, because your first assignment starts now. Dante moved back to his laptop, opened it, pulled up security footage. I'm hosting a dinner tomorrow night. Politicians, businessmen, people who pretend they're legitimate while taking my money to look the other way. Thorne will be there. Nia's breath caught. You invited him? I invited him before I knew who he was to you. Canceling now would signal that something has changed, which would make him suspicious. So instead, you're going to attend that dinner. You're going to observe. And you're going to tell me everything you notice about who he talks to, how he moves, what makes him nervous. Dante's eyes met hers. Think you can do that? Nia's mind was already calculating. The risk, the exposure, the sheer audacity of sitting in the same room with the man who wanted her dead, protected only by the fragile shield of Dante's presence and reputation. But this was what she'd signed up for. This was the world she'd chosen to enter. I can do that, she said. Good. Dante closed the laptop. Elena will take you shopping today. You need appropriate clothes for tomorrow night. Carlo will go with you. You don't leave their sight. You don't make calls. You don't talk to anyone without clearance. Understand? Yes. And Nia? Dante's voice softened fractionally. I know what I'm asking. Facing Thorne tomorrow night. Knowing what he wants to do to you that takes courage. But you walked into that club 2 nights ago and approached the most dangerous man in Chicago. So I know you have courage. The question is whether you have discipline. Because courage without discipline gets people killed. I have both, Nia said quietly. He studied her a moment longer, then nodded. We'll see. Carlo, take her to Elena. Nia stood, walked to the door, paused and looked back. Mr. Moretti? Yes? Thank you. For listening. For taking this seriously. For giving me a chance. Thank you, Nia said, and walked out before she could see his reaction. Before the weight of gratitude could turn into something more complicated. Before she could think too hard about the fact that she was thanking a crime lord for saving her life by drawing her into his world. This was her choice. She'd made it with clear eyes and full knowledge of what it would cost. Now she just had to survive long enough to see if the price had been worth paying.